You're listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, April 29th, 2022.
Whew, April's almost over.
Which is crazy. And do you know how I know things are getting crazy, Andrew? You are sending me deck pics. And you need to stop it. It's inappropriate. Every day with your deck pics. Unsolicited deck pics.
I sent you one deck pic.
You just like, look how big my deck is. And you stacked cans of Diet Pepsi next to it? Inappropriate.
So yes, okay. So before anyone gets crazy, Dan's actually talking. I recently got in the mail a Steam Deck, which is the new portable video game system from Valve.
Right.
But of course, when I said, "Oh, I'm getting this thing," Dan was like, "Ooh, you're gonna take a bunch of deck pics."
Yeah, that's a joke I've been fucking pushing into the ground for about 3 weeks. I'm not gonna lie.
So it worked out really well because I did. You
did. You did. And you know what? That's a big deck you got.
That's it. Most people have actually, because in tradition of offensive pictures, I stacked two soda cans next to it for context, for size, and it's actually, so for those who know, Valve announced this actually it was only a year ago, less than a year ago, that they're making this system.
Yeah,
that's my recollection. It was middle of 21.
Yeah,
and then with orders in December, but then of course it got delayed until now. So the Steam Deck, it's a portable system. It's pretty chunky. It's pretty big, which is nothing wrong with that. It's just I don't know what I was expecting, but
it's about two Diet Pepsi cans long. Yeah,
two soda cans wide.
That's right.
Yeah, and it basically connects to your Steam, right. or if you don't have one, I guess you create one, and you can download and play games. It's got multiple control methods, but it is really intended to be like a video game console, right?
Right.
So it's got analog sticks, it's got buttons, it's got bumpers,
bumpers and triggers, or just bumpers?
Bumpers and triggers, and also freaky buttons.
Valve
likes free. Yeah, Valve has always had did you know if you press on the back, it's also a button,
Gotcha.
So there's actually a bunch of buttons on the back of the thing that, and there's also, I think, an axis detection thing, stuff that maybe something will use that.
PlayStation with their like this big button that's also a touchpad. No, what? Why? Stop it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's available. Although they're still it's people who pre-ordered them are basically they're fulfilling them as quickly as they can, which is not very fast. But I got one.
What's the use case scenario for you with regard to this machine?
I'm a kind of a gadgeteer, so to a certain extent, I just sometimes buy things.
Right? Are you heart? Are you fire? Are you earth?
No, that's Planeteer.
Oh, that's Planeteer. Yeah. Sorry.
But it is, it's the one thing. It's that for me, and I've talked about this in the past, that when it comes to video games, I kind of started transitioning to just playing games on Steam. All the games I'd been playing on my PlayStation or Xbox or whatever, I was like, I'm just going to move to Steam because one of the things that I got upset about was, the new PlayStation comes out and all of a sudden you don't necessarily have the ability to play your old PlayStation games. Or if you do, it's only at the largesse of the company that provides the emulator, which, I think Microsoft is pretty good at that. Although even then they're not perfect.
Right.
So I got a little bit frustrated where I realized with Steam, I on my computer, I still had Steam games that I bought 10 years ago. And in a lot of cases, depending on the operating system, they would still run. So I was like, well, I'm just going to start moving kind of my big game playing to Steam. So for me, the use case is this is a portable gizmo that for some of these games, I can play them on the wherever, right? On the bus, on the plane, in the train, on the Ferris wheel.
Yeah, because you and your Ferris wheel habits.
That's actually one of the examples that's on the box. It says,
really?
like, it has like, on the train, in different languages. One of them is on the Ferris wheel. I'm like, who gets on a Ferris wheel to play video games?
That reminds me of the Nintendo Switch reveal trailer where it's like, oh, get together with your mid-20s friends and play this on the roof of your apartment building.
Oh, and I'm ready to do that. Like, I'm ready to bring my Switch deck to a rooftop party and say, hey,
and
guys,
sit alone
play.
in the corner and ignore the rest of the party. So, no, I guess by use case, I mean, like, I don't know. Again, by the time of this recording, have you had it less than a week at this point?
Oh, yeah, like days. In fact, actually, a day or two.
I guess in terms of use case, I mean, now that you've put your hands on your deck and you have a wide variety of games at your disposal through your Steam account, what kind of games do you think you'll be playing on your Steam Deck versus like what kind of benefit or use case scenario does that create an advantage? Aside, because yeah, I mean, especially with Seattle being so busy and you so connected with, like, you're not doing a lot of traveling, but right. Like, so what's sort of like for you, and how does this fit into your gaming lifestyle, and what kind of games do you think you'll be playing on the Steam Deck?
So that's a good question. I don't have necessarily a perfect answer. When I got it, I installed exactly 2 games. One was Stardew Valley, the award-winning farming simulator, and one was the original Final Fantasy, but the pixel remaster. So Final Fantasy 1. Because those were games that I kind of joked would be the kind of game that, go buy a $500 portable game system and play right. Games that look like they came out in the 90s, right? But the one thing actually I quickly discovered is, and if you don't know, Steam implemented cloud saving quite some time ago.
Oh, that's cool.
Right. So, and I already had it where, like, I had one computer that I'd played games on, and I got another computer, and my saved games were all in the cloud. That is now especially relevant with the Steam Deck.
That's
because
cool.
I can, go, sit somewhere and play a game out, like in the park, I guess, for 30 minutes.
Or on a Ferris wheel, as you said.
Or on a Ferris wheel, or on the ferry, or on a bus. And it saves to the cloud. So then when I go home, I can start up my main computer and then continue where I left off.
Have you engaged with that very much? Is it seamless?
Yeah, as long as the only issue is just making sure that the Steam Deck connects to the internet.
Sure.
But then the worst case would be I come home, turn it on, let it sync to the cloud on my home network, and then, but yeah, no, it has been seamless in the 1 or 2 instances where, like, I kind of like have just been trying it out in places to see what it's like.
Right.
Yeah, and it is the kind of thing where it is like, hey, you're playing here and then you transition to there. Now, the other kind of thing that I'd read about, and I've not researched this at the time of this recording, it does have Bluetooth, so you can connect a Bluetooth mouse and a Bluetooth keyboard if you want. It also has, I believe, you can connect a dock to it. There's a USB-C port that it uses for charging, but nowadays USB-C, that's also, you can connect like their docks that have HDMI ports, and I believe the idea is you can plug in a monitor to it.
Oh, that's cool.
So you conceivably could plug in a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse and play the games that aren't controller based, right? That haven't been adapted to the Steam Deck. So you could play, Age of Empires 3 or whatever.
Right.
And that's the thing that I'm kind of curious about. Now, I know it's not the most sophisticated hardware. The system itself, generally, it runs on its own display at 720p. Not sure how it'll run some of these things if you're on a 1080p monitor. But suddenly, to me, what this becomes is potentially a way for people, i.e. Dan, that might want to play have some Steam games, but doesn't want to deal with the trouble of buying computers, right?
Sure.
It's basically a Steam console that really functions like a console, but is Steam games.
So plebs like Dan that doesn't need anything more than a 720p because his dumb brain can't handle anything higher resolution.
Well, I mentioned you because, historically there have been games that are that seems cool, but you have, you're a Mac user, and Mac game support has kind of gone to the hills. Yep. So the idea of this is like a console for playing Steam games that's different than the Steam box, right? Because Valve has directly involved themselves with it. I
was going to bring that up. This sort of the ask you to compare this against the Steam box not debacle, but definitely push.
Debacle's it's the right term, because
okay.
Steam said, we're going to do this thing. Steam OS is made. You could create consoles with it. People were, outputting games, so they supported the Steam operating system, which is not like super hard. It's just a Linux variant. But then the realization was that they didn't make them themselves. They asked other people, hey, you can do it if you want. So
licensing,
Alienware tried doing it. I don't even know if it was licensing or you could just do it. But then it was like, that's
you
tough.
Ostensibly bought a Steam box, but it was like just a PC, right?
Well, it just had Windows, right? Because by the time I bought Alienware's Steam box, they'd already just basically started selling the same footprint, the same, small, tight hardware, but with a Windows, Windows 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever the Windows 8, I think.
In terms of, I guess, firmware, what is the Steam box running? Is it proprietary? I'm guessing it's proprietary. Is it a variation on Steam OS?
Steam OS.
Okay. Yeah.
Which was, Steam OS was kind of designed so all it does is basically start Steam.
Right.
And you don't even it is kind of just like any other console's navigation system, except it's Steam, And I say that because it looks like Steam, it acts like Steam. It's arranged a little bit differently, but it's just like you turn this thing on and Steam is running.
Right.
There's no... Now, the funny thing is actually when I got it, it's like, ooh, you have a factory fresh Steam Deck. You need to get an update, a firmware update. Hey, plug this into the AC adapter and don't mind that things are going to look weird. And it was funny because it even says, things will look sideways for a bit. Don't worry, that's normal.
Right.
And so suddenly, right, if you imagine that you're holding it with your two hands and that's the normal orientation, suddenly this Linux distribution stuff starts pouring from left to right, 90 degrees out of phase. It's like, oh, that's weird. But yeah.
So you've been having fun with it? Any particular, I'm not going to say revelatory playing experiences because it's just you playing your Steam games on a smaller handheld system. How has it been playing stuff handheld? Are you looking forward to playing any particular games in a handheld system? Obviously, like we said, as of this recording, it's still fresh. So I'm not going to ask you to create any reviews or criticism. But is there anything that you're is there any sort of over-under kind of thoughts you have about the Steam Deck so far?
So I would say that there's still some probably some technical issues to work out. For example, I've been having a problem that other people have had where it'll have trouble connecting to the Steam servers.
Oh, interesting.
And that's just because it has something to do with and actually the fix is to go into developer mode and turn off a feature. So it's just a software thing that something they're doing where it's a power saving feature that's somehow tricking it into not connecting to Steam properly. But it's not critical, and there's a way to fix it. So that's that. There's little issues like that they're clearly still working out. One of the things is some of these games, so Stardew Valley is a good example, right? This is Stardew Valley. It's not the most hardware-intensive game in creation, but because of I think the way it was developed, it's actually I think running in basically an emulator box. Right, there's something that they download. So when you download Stardew Valley, it then goes and downloads this extra thing, which is basically play this game in a shell that lets it do whatever it needs to do because it's written with certain libraries and stuff. So because of that, there's sometimes where it stutters a little bit, and I suspect that's an emulation issue essentially. Because I think Stardew Valley, if you look, was never distributed for Steam OS. I don't think.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Whereas some games have Steam OS distributions. That's my guess anyway. So I'm curious to see. I think what I like is there are a lot of games out there that you can play at small doses, right? For example, if when I want to play Final Fantasy again, I have it and it has save anywhere feature, so I can play for 20 minutes, wherever I'm at, and then I'm ready to go back to stuff, save it, go do my thing, and then play it whenever, rather than having to only play it at home or whatever. I like that kind of stuff. There's other things that are really one of the things that they've done is they started flagging certain games on Steam as hey, this is good on the Steam Deck.
Oh, okay.
Which I don't know what that means, but they're telling me. And what's weird is, for example, Jackbox Party.
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right. And so that's a weird one where I'm like, oh,
that would make a lot
then
of
suddenly
sense. Yeah.
Andrew and his rooftop party, right? We're like, hey guys, I got this thing. Let's do a little jackbox.
For some reason, your
roof.
rooftop also has a Ferris wheel. Ferris wheel?
No, has good internet connect. Well, no, because I can do it through my phone. I've already actually tested that. So I could literally plug my phone. Although then, how do I play? Because I need my phone to play. Well, whatever. I have my wireless.
That's not what we're worried about here. This is the future.
Right, but like, there are some interesting kind of uses there where like, oh, I would not have. Now it's going to be a little weird because everyone's gathering around this little. But then again, the other thing is if I go to a friend's house. Hey, I got Jackbox on my thing. Let me just plug it into your TV.
You got Jackbox on your deck?
Yeah, right. Ooh. So there's definitely some kind of I'm interested to see what sort of things become easy to do. Like for example, Stardew Valley has multiplayer mode, which I've never done. But like now, like, hey, I'm visiting my friend. Like, oh, you're playing Stardew. Let me come into your game with you and like harvest your crops.
Right.
Well, that sounds weird. So. That kind of the ability to easily do some multiplayer stuff that normally like we could have done through the internet, and we're still doing it basically through the internet, but now we're doing it sitting next to each other, and it's not like the 90s where I hauled my desktop computer to your house. I just have this gizmo. So I'm interested to see how that works, and then of course, are there going to be other games that people make that kind of take advantage of the portability here? Because I guess arguably there are already some of those things because people are making games for laptops. It's just that this is, probably cheaper than a laptop of its with that technical stuff, but then also not as versatile.
I don't mean to throw you under the bus. What's the price tag on this thing?
There's 3 versions out, and the big difference in price is I think the drive space. Although you can also put in an SD card. The cheap one is like 400, and then like 500, then 600 or something. Something like that. I honestly, it's around that. I think they may have gone up because, inflation.
Worldwide pandemic and all that stuff.
Worldwide pandemic. And I
guess the other question, since it is basically kind of, it's a platform for Steam, which is a PC gaming,
Nexus
platform, right? What do you think about the market? And I'm not advocating for this kind of behavior, but like people going in and not breaking it, but, basically reformatting these machines to become mini PCs or mini Windows machines or anything like that. I guess the question I'm asking is how closed of a system does it feel? Because that's the thing with like a lot of, especially with Nintendo products. It's like, this is our Nintendo and Apple, actually. That's what I think of. It's like, this is our shit. Don't fuck with this stuff. And if you do, we'll basically hunt you down and make you very sad. Have you heard about anything like that, or what do you think the potential is for that?
There's an option, like a page or a section of the Steam Deck where it talks about non-Steam applications. And it actually says like, hey, do you want to install Chrome?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if it's installing a web browser, at that point, it's already connected you to a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
So I actually think, you can put other stuff on there as long, and it just has to be now, granted, you could probably try to reformat the whole damn thing, but like it's running SteamOS, which is, a Linux derivative. So it's probably not hard to have applications that are built for SteamOS, and you just install them.
Right.
I don't know how to do that. Probably put it on a SD card. There's probably a way to do it. I'm not going to go looking for that.
Can you just plug it straight into your desktop and like have immediate connectivity and sharing of files and whatnot? Or
I don't know. I have not tried that.
Fair enough. You know what? Expect an update, dear listeners.
Right. And one thing I did read some people who actually have been with some technical know-how have been setting up basically like emulators for other systems, including I think older consoles is what people are doing, and then they say, hey, that's pretty cool. So it is apparently a full Linux desktop environment. Like it is, so there is a way to access all that. It takes a little bit more skill than Andrew is doing,
willing to put into it, because he just wants to enjoy the experience that's presented to him.
Stardew Valley on the Ferris wheel. I'm gonna go ride the Ferris wheel in Seattle so I can pull my Steam Deck out to do the thing I said I was gonna do, and then I'm gonna drop it, and then I'm gonna feel real dumb.
You're gonna pay the guy running the Ferris wheel to make sure you get stopped at the top.
I get stuck at the top so I can finish a whole day of Stardew Valley.
Come on, yeah, you gotta hit these. I got quotas. Ferris wheel operator.
I gotta get these potatoes. So it's an interesting, in the world of video games and stuff, Steam is not a closed space, but it's not an entirely open space. But as far as like systems go, this is the one that is definitely the most of kind of big name stuff, right? In a while. It didn't take long for a lot of the Microsoft and Sony to really try to restrict what people did with their system. So,
right.
I'm curious to see what people do with it. Right now, I kind of like it. Is it necessary? No. Did I spend a lot of money on something that maybe I'll use? Well, who knows, right? I have no idea. The joke is I'll be the nerd that carries it around with him all day. So like, I've got 20 minutes. Right. Let's go harvest some potatoes. And the joke is I use Stardew Valley as the example because that was just the first game I thought of. But like there are plenty of other games, and you can imagine other games with easy, save features where I could play 6 minutes of this thing.
My first thought was like, there's plenty of roguelikes to play on your Steam Deck. Right? Play some Rogue Legacy 2. I don't know if
which comes out this week.
Oh shit, is that not out yet? That's been early access this whole time.
It's been early access.
Oh,
the official
wow.
release is this. It actually has by the time this episode airs, it will be in full release.
That's
so
awesome.
So there's definitely I think I'll admit I'm going to say this. One of the reasons I did really want to get one is I like to have gadgets, but to test it because to me I do literally think of someone like Dan. Who would play more of these games except for not wanting to like deal with buying a computer. Mm-hmm. And so I do think about this like, okay, here's just for the games, I
mean, there's the rub though. I mean, especially when it comes to indie games, which is kind of the forte for both you and I. Like a lot of that stuff is coming out elsewhere on
everything
platforms that can handle it because a lot of these games aren't, demanding too much of their hardware.
Right.
So like honestly, like buying the Switch has opened up a lot of possibility to me because I can plug it into the dock and play it on my TV
and play it on your TV,
and then also bring it upstairs and play it in my office, or buying it on my PlayStation 4. So like it'll be interesting to see if there is a use case scenario for someone like me. I'm not discounting it at all because there is a world of PC gaming out there that I don't have access to. I just wonder if that's the right platform for me to access those kinds of games. Mm-hmm. We'll see.
Well, and the nice thing about it is even if you did, it would still be on Steam. So even if the deck stops working, the games are still there.
Yeah.
And that's actually like for me, I will say that was a moment when I turned it on. And it's like games that you already own that are good on deck. And there was 90 games on the list.
Nice.
Granted, I have a lot of Steam games, like a lot of people in my class, but there was just something of like, there's already so many things there that I can just start grabbing,
Right. The last question I guess I wanted to ask, and it doesn't sound like you've really been playing games that this is a problem for, but I'm actually going to jump to a discussion we've had about the PlayStation 4, and I don't know if we had it on the podcast or not, but one of the issues I had playing. And it stands out in my mind because we got response from the developers. But playing the game Armello, a wonderful little game, where on the PlayStation 4, it's a standard PC to console problem where the text is really small because it's text developed for monitors. I'm guessing it sounds like if you've been playing mostly Stardew.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that on-screen text hasn't been a problem.
I did start Final Fantasy.
I wonder how many of those kinds of issues in terms of like, because of the resolution, because of the size of the screen, how many developers are going to account for that, and if you're going to have any experiences. And this is not like a deal breaker, but like going like, oh, that's really small on this tiny screen, and we are almost 42 years old.
Definitely. Although it's a little bit different in my experience than the PlayStation because like it is running at 720p, so it's a little bit already like there's less pixels on the screen, and also you're holding it right in front of your fewer pixels on the screen.
Thank you.
And you're also holding it right in front of your face.
Sure.
As opposed
because you need glasses, Andrew, is what we.
Right. So we'll see. But I actually, that's like Final Fantasy is the one where because it had the funny font, I was actually curious, but I didn't play it long enough to take in the funny font.
Right. I know I just hit A to make everybody hit fight.
So we'll see as it goes on. I think it's an interesting experiment. I like it for what it does. It is not for everybody, but I think there are some really interesting uses of it, and I'm definitely going to use it. I've already been using it. It is like this idea of like, hey, I've got 10 minutes or 20 minutes. Let me pull out my Steam Deck and play whatever game.
And I mean, the nice thing is like, because we're such a burgeoning company, you just use the company credit card to write it off, right? You bought it and you send in the invoice.
Oh, you mean us?
Yeah.
I thought you meant my actual job.
No. For all intents and purposes, corporation for all intents and purposes. You got that company card, right?
Believe the lie. So anyway, that's what I did. I want to talk about that, but that's not all we want to talk about this week, because that was actually supposed to be short, and it was longer.
It was not,
than I expected.
because we got stuff to talk about with regard to that.
But the other thing is, Dan, I hear you got something new in your life.
A baby boy is
named Paramount.
Named Paramount Plus. Yes, and because of that, we got a week for free. As I have discussed on the show before, Star Trek: The Next Generation left Netflix as of April 1st. And we're like, okay, so like we have some time like to figure out when and how we want to maybe plug into Paramount Plus, even to the extent that like maybe we'll just buy the seasons of TNG on Amazon or something like that, because it's like, what's the over under here? What's the thing that works best for us?
Right. And
then a week passed, and then 2 weeks passed, and then 3 weeks passed, and I'm like, I need TNG now. And and so I looked up Paramount Plus, and the cost is reasonable, and like I'm doing all right, so I'm like, let's just go for it. And the best part is this: before we even talk about what we plan to talk about, when you create an account on Paramount Plus, it's like, click all the shows you're interested in. I'm like, Star Trek. Oh, and 1883, because cowboys and shit. And then it's funny right now, actually not right now, because early this evening, before this recording, we added a second show. But if you had brought up my watch list on Paramount Plus, there was only one thing on there: The Next Generation.
Star Trek: The Next Generation.
We have now added The Lower Decks, and I'm really excited to get into that. That show looks amazing, based on your recommendation, but also just watching the trailer. I'm like, why haven't we been watching this already? Right? So yeah, we're back into Star Trek, and the biggest reason was this, honestly, and it's selfish, but I think it's actually forward-looking, considering my advancing age, is that I didn't want too much time to go by before I forgot where we left off. I subscribed to Paramount Plus. I'm like, okay, we're in season 5. Let's scroll down. Oh, that's why we stopped watching. It was a 2-parter. And it's a 2-parter called Unification.
Technically, I believe titled Unification I and Unification II.
Exactly, Roman numerals, I believe, even.
I'm saying that because there's a follow on to that later.
I remember even like my wife and I made a conscious effort. Like, okay, no, we're stopping here because this looks not well. It's a 2-parter, and secondly, this looks like it's going to be a bit heavy because there is a very significant guest star in the show. And then when I texted you and saying we're watching Unification Part 1, and you're like, first, it's called Unification 1. Second, buckle up. And you were not wrong. Let's talk about Unification, Andrew.
So Unification, in the 5th season of Star Trek: The Next Generation, released in November of 1991. It's kind of a big deal because it is the first appearance in Star Trek: The Next Generation. No, not the first appearance. The first major. It's tough because it's significant, but it's also, I'm trying not to tread on the people that came before. It's the first time that a main character from the original season show appeared in like a major part. right? Because DeForest Kelley was actually in the original pilot in what was basically a walk-on.
But not as a named character.
Yeah, he's never named, although he is very clearly Dr. McCoy or Admiral McCoy, but they never name him. So, and he does, and Mark Lenard does appear as Spock's father, Sarek, in season 3, I believe. Point is, there had been people from the original series in Next Generation previously, but this was the first time it was like, here's a main character, Leonard Nimoy, playing Spock, in a role that is not just a cameo. He is going to be a character of import. Well, at least in the second episode. The first episode, he is just a cameo. But the idea is that the story focuses on this character that we know from the original series, Spock. And the thing that's also relevant to it, and this is something that it was funny because as you're watching the second episode, Dan, we were texting about this, where I say, hey, there's a line in the show that you just loved. You're like, Cowboy Diplomacy, right?
Right.
And I text you like, hey, for context, it's important to know that this show came out around the same time as Star Trek VI.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay. And then you're like later like, oh, this talking about making peace with the Klingon Empire, is that in an episode or something?
Yeah.
Like, that is Star Trek VI.
Right. So there's okay. So that's the thing. It's like what you made clear to me is that what this two-parter is promotion to an extent, which is it's obviously the Next Generation takes place a long time after the original series, OTS as I like to call it, which I know that doesn't line up.
That's okay. Lower Decks will fix you on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there's a line in there where Spock, because part of the show of TNG is all about like, oh, we made peace with the Klingons and that they're part of the Federation and some bullshit went down.
Well, they're not part of the Federation, but they're friends.
Right. Apologies. And some shit went down with the Vulcans and the Romulans, and like the Romulans is they're basically across the DMZ, and like we're not dealing with them. They're mysterious. They're scary. And then Spock shows up and he starts dropping history on us. And the best part about it is like he could be dropping this knowledge on us, and whether it was filmed or not, again, understanding this is not real history that happened, one, because it's in the far future, but two, the fact that these two series take place so far apart from each other, it's kind of like what they do with Doctor Who, where it's like what Doctor Who sort of like the novels do or the comics do. It's like, oh yeah, episode 3 and 4 of this season, we can still tell 14 stories in between those episodes because it's a time travel show. Like, yeah, right? He's dropping stuff about, it's like, oh yeah, I was working, Captain Kirk, I put him in a situation, and like, oh, during the Klingon peace talks, I'm like, I figured he was just kind of, they were just filling stuff in, but I figured, why not throw this question at my Star Trek friend and say, hey, was this filmed? Was what are you talking about? Is this like a filmed piece of history? And Andrew previously had said, oh yeah, I think that like they were filming this side by side with Star Trek VI. And then I'm like, so yeah, was this Klingon peace talks filmed? He's like, yeah, it's called Star Trek VI. I'm like, oh, okay.
Which is actually what's interesting about it, and I don't think I remember this watching it because I was also like 11, right? Was the idea that they're mentioning things that are in the movie that had not come out yet.
Right.
Because this episode comes out in November of 1991. Right. Star Trek VI comes out a month later in December. Right. So it is, to a certain extent, like one of these early instances of Star Trek trying to get you hyped about the other thing with the other show. Because actually also, and it's worth mentioning, because that's also the movie that featured an actor from Next Generation in it.
Go on.
Michael Dorn portrays Colonel Worf.
What?
Who's a Klingon.
He's playing his own daddy?
It's more like his grandfather or something, right? Because his father's named Moog. We already know that.
Right, that's true.
Because he says it every time, I'm Worf, son of Moog. Like, if you forget, he's going to remind you, because that's what you do when you're Klingon.
Well, when he's not singing Klingon opera. So, like, we could go off track, but, like, Unification, parts 1 and 2 are astounding pieces of fiction. And as a person that's currently consuming the Next Generation episode by episode, it represents this really bold move on the part of this show, because generally speaking, they've kept the show pretty contained. It's like maybe obviously the majority of the show takes place on the Enterprise, and maybe there's some quote unquote location shots in a soundstage, right?
Or location shots in the nearby like park,
right? right, where they have just people in like sheer satin or silk running around. Like I'm seeing everybody's nipples in this show. What are you doing?
It's the 80s.
Early TNG is quite wonderful, but like one of the things with these two episodes, like it's, for lack of a better word, cinematic. We have two, at the very least, storylines going on. There's the Picard and Spock storyline, and then there's the Enterprise storyline across these two episodes. And they are very different. Mm-hmm. And the thing that stood out to me is that they're going all over the place. There's lots of sets, lots of locations, and the tones are very different. Like the considering the phrase we used earlier that we quoted from the show Cowboy Diplomacy, the Picard Spock aspect is more traditional TNG, where it's people talking. It's all about reuniting the Vulcans and the Romulans, and Spock's intent to take advantage of a political movement going on in Romulus, working through philosophical and ideological differences and trying to solve political problems. The Enterprise side is what I called Star Trek Noir. It's like it's it's Riker and Worf and Troy going from place to place, literally tossing scumbags to get information. Worf singing opera.
Yeah.
From this,
that's
along
our
with
our first reference to Klingon opera.
Yeah, quote unquote. It's so hyperbolic and arch and beautiful, but also very like genre-y. Whereas the Picard, which is funny because like the Picard and Spock stuff has its own silliness because they're wearing couches as costumes because that's the Romulan way, I guess. And
well, it's because all Romulans go to the same tailor and all go to the same barber, right?
Right. Their tailor is called IKEA. They're all dressed like couches, and
shoulder pads.
But oh, dude, yeah, everybody's wearing a love seat. But they're having like philosophical conversations and also like deeply psychological conversations, especially dealing with like, you know, the relationship between sons and fathers and whatnot. Like it's powerful stuff, especially how Unification II ends. Like it literally ends on one of the most powerful moments I've seen in the show. And when you look back at the Riker, Worf, and Troy part of the show, it's like, this is bonkers. But what I love about it is like, it's 5 seasons in, this show is willing to take risks. Sure, I'm willing to write off the fact that they're taking these risks probably because they had extra budget in order to promote this movie that's coming out. But still, they were really willing to not only to take that money and opportunity and actually tell a good story and a varied story and do something that the show hadn't really done before. And I don't know, from this point, Andrew would be a better speaker than I on this, but I hope it kind of sets a precedent for what the show can do going forward. And so I guess the question I have for you is like, to me, it kind of felt like a sea change in some ways. Do you feel they kind of capitalize on that going forward, or is it kind of back to TNG as usual, which I should say is not a bad thing?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, people always say that seasons 4 and 5 are kind of some of the heavy hitters of the show, right? You know, 4 opens with episodes you've already discussed of being just like really, you know, big stories about family, about pain, about trauma.
Sets up a whole other shows, right?
Relationships between brothers, you know, relationships between fathers. And this is kind of more of the same.
Yeah.
And I think we still see that. And we also still see, you know, the same stuff. You know, probably most people say that TNG starts to not punch as high, although some people, you know, it's still a good show. It definitely there's more as they're going on. There's, you know, okay, we've run out of family members to have crisis with, right?
Ronald D. Moore's like, I'm done here.
Well, because he leaves to go. Actually, I'm not sure at what point he moves to DS9.
Because that starts in season 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some I don't know what the trends, how people got moved over, but and of course Deep Space Nine starts to do a lot of that stuff too. Like, can we talk about people's relationships with family and conflict, and also, that's the first time we have a show where they as they kind of say we violated Gene's rules about the perfect society. Well,
ironically,
yeah. Well, and what happened in this episode?
Well, both episode 1 and 2 they both open with a dedication in memoriam to one Gene Roddenberry, because he passed away, and I guess that in itself is a signpost for the show and for Star Trek in general, honestly.
And the one thing that's funny is you talk about how Unification has, at its core, there's a discussion about the relationships between a father and son, and what's remarkable, and I'm not gonna say too much, but there's a third part to this episode, Unification III, which is part of Discovery Season 3.
So that's recent. That's like
a year and a half
last
ago.
few years. Yeah.
And so this is, and the reason why it's because it involves the same people and the same kind of story, because it is, 1,000 years in the future, or I guess at this point, like 700 years in the future, something like that. Michael Burnham, who's the human that was raised by Sarek on Vulcan and is basically Spock's little sister or older sister, I think. Whatever.
A sister.
Who she last sees Spock in when he's just an ensign on the Enterprise, and then she gets flung into the future, and she comes back to the planet that was formerly Vulcan. Actually, this is the funny thing. If you look up the planet Vulcan on Memory Alpha, it uses its new name now, and it's like, what? Which is Navarre. And there's a... But anyway, so it's just that she comes there, and she basically gets back involved with the process of unification. And part of it there is her looking back on her brother, who, when she left, he was just recovering from some trauma in Discovery Season 2. And now she finds out in the intervening, 800 years... he goes and becomes this person that goes to Romulus and tries to have this, to bring this unification between the people. And then she gets involved with that. And of course she has her own family, not drama, but she has her own kind of confrontation with family issues in this process as well. She's human. Yeah.
Okay.
Raised by a Vulcan and a human, Amanda and Sarek. Mm-hmm. And with a Vulcan, a half Vulcan brother, and a mysterious half brother she doesn't know about. That's Star Trek V. That's a different story. But so the point is, and it's what's interesting is that I had forgotten that there's how much of that talks about that relationship between fathers and sons, because that relationship comes up in Discovery as well. Okay. They address the idea of why, one of the things is there's always the idea that Spock and his father always didn't get along, and there's more context to it now because there's this human girl, and there's things that happened, and so the idea that it comes back to Unification 3, and here we are, and they even have footage of Leonard Nimoy from that episode. Oh wow! Kind of doing what's talking. They're like, this is from the Captain Picard's last report, and it's him basically saying a lot of these same things, and then her looking at that is like, that's my little brother, except 100 years older than I remember him. Yeah.
Right. It's interesting because the title is multifaceted, as you can assume from the quality of writing on the show, right? Ostensibly, it's about the reunification of the Vulcans and the Romulans, but ultimately, going back to what we've been talking about, it's the reunification of Spock and his father. Mm-hmm. And you talk about Spock and his father didn't really get along, but there's a beautiful line in the in Unification II where he's talking to Picard, and Picard mentions how he and his father always were fighting. And Spock says in response, it's in those fights where I learned the most about him, and I connected with him most, and I got a lot of joy out of those debates, right? And Picard, which especially for people that lose parents young, which I haven't, I don't mean to speak for you, Andrew, but you haven't, but I know people that have, like, Picard was able to come through and say, well, he got a lot out of those fights from you as well. And it's something that science fiction can do so well. And provide solace and catharsis for not only obviously big political, sociological issues, but also the personal. These 2 episodes are absolutely amazing. And to see them doing such kind of wonderful, deep stuff, so deep into a show's lifespan, like usually this is the part where they just, bring on the kid because we need to attract youths, right? They got rid of the kid because that guy,
got rid of the kid. And they're bringing in more old.
It's wonderful. Star Trek Next Generation, I recommend it. Subscribe to Paramount Plus. We are not sponsored by them, although they should openly consider it.
Well, and I think a lot about it because I'm watching Picard season 2, and interesting enough, Picard season 2 is about, among other things, is about Picard and the relationship with his father. And it's funny to mention that and to be like, wow, there's a lot of, and his mother, his parents, right? I mean, I'm kind of I'll watch all these shows, I like them, but
right, because you're a fan, but also,
well, and there's always this idea of taking these characters and doing things with them that are different and interesting, and then of introducing new characters that I can conceivably grow to appreciate. Like, I always say as Picard ends, I definitely hope they take some of these characters and put them in other shows, right? But
I just like both of us apparently, like we have the conspiracy theorists like red yarn all over these maps, but instead of connecting plot points like most nerds do, we're just like, it's all about dads, bro. It's not. It's about stars and
there's definitely a lot about parenting though,
Yeah, absolutely.
Our parents,
which is and that itself is a metaphor for, exploration and knowledge and whatnot. Like it's
actually thinking about it, wow, Deep Space Nine has a lot about fathers and sons. Hell, even Lower Decks has a thing about parents and children.
Well, there we go. We figured it out. We beat Star Trek.
It's all about the game. Parents. It's about troubled relationships between parents and their children.
I'm glad we had this conversation now. I can cancel Paramount Plus during my free trial.
No more Star Trek necessary.
So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on Facebook.
You can find us on other social media as well, such as Twitter and Instagram, where you can find us at our respective handles. On Twitter, you can find me at Bethel. You can find Andrew tweeting about tabletop role-playing games and Star Trek, as a matter of fact, at Profound Dark. You can also find us on Instagram. We can find Andrew at Profound Brick and me and my work at Bethel Comics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page by clicking on the link in the corner. There you'll find this podcast. The joke is you may be even listening to this podcast on YouTube. So good on you. Ring the bell, as they say. Or click the bell, or whatever. Subscribe.
Click the bell.
And subscribe.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out most, though, would be to go to their storefront and leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithm.
Algorithms.
Do you mind me taking be a little self-indulgent here?
Oh, wait, did something exciting happen?
No, not at all. You might have seen, dear listeners, on the internet, and it's true, it has been announced that that Chris Pine's production studio, his new production studio called Barry Linen, has gotten a development deal with the network FX to produce an animated series based on my comic Long John. Now that doesn't mean a lot aside from like that deal has happened, and it's just in development, and it's exciting and cool but and
it's now
wild.
Public
and
knowledge, right? This was announced.
It is now public knowledge. Yeah, that's the thing. It's been something that's been going on for a long time. I'm very excited.
You've been sitting on this secret for like 20 years, right?
For 20 years, approximately. And I'm super stoked to work with. Honestly, like I'm excited to work with this company. I'm excited to see what they do with this, and the people that are involved with it have been really cool so far. So like,
that's good.
Who knows where it goes from here? I'm super excited, and I hope you are too.
Now you just got to finish that fucking comic.
I just got to finish that comic. Yeah, we don't need to Game of Thrones this shit here.
You're on track to George R. R. Martin your way through this show.
Nope. Shit, you're right. Anyway, it's been an exciting week, and thank you all for the support and for checking out the comic if you haven't yet, and thank you all for the kind notes about the news. But it's been weird and exciting, and we'll see where it goes from here. So until your week brings even more good news, dear listeners, So until your week brings even more Cowboy Diplomacy, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplin.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. So Unification in the fourth season of Star Trek: The Next Generation, fifth. Is it the fifth? Jesus Christ!
I believe so. Let me double check.
You're right. All right. Woof.
Thank you.
Well, you're at our website at forallintents.net. You can also take a look at our Twitter shit.
Ooh.
Well, you're
good. You could do that too. Because I'm always down for a little bit of Cowboy Diplomacy.
Yeah, it's there's
honestly that could be an alternate title for the HBO show Deadwood. It's basically the same fucking thing.
Because the first thing I saw him in, I knew about him in was in Spider-Man, and you're like, who's this guy? And you're
no, it's not, dude.
What?
Doctor Who.
Oh, okay.
We played Hayseed Jones from wow, this is crazy here in New York. I'm living in a Hooverville. Jesus.
Oh boy.
Know your roots, my dude.
Oh, goodness gracious.